Hello and welcome to the CDFA's Resilient Food Systems Infrastructure, or RFSI, Grant Management presentation. This presentation is a quick overview of what to expect regarding grant management for proposals that are selected for funding. Please keep in mind that this is an expected grant management guideline overview. The official RFSI grant management guidelines have yet to be published and are subject to change. All successful proposals will receive formalized grant management procedures during the grant agreement execution process. Here is a quick program timeline from application due date to announcement of awards. Applications are due February 26, 2024 at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Once applications are due, they will enter in an administrative and technical review period from February 26 through May of 2024. Applications that have been selected will be sent to USDA for final review and approval in May of 2024. USDA may have questions or request additional descriptions from the applicants as they review proposals over the summer. USDA will announce the awarded applications in the fall of 2024. Note that the dates beyond application due dates are tentative dates, as review processes may extend past projected dates based on application completeness. Timekeeping requirements. Part of the timekeeping requirements include activity reports that are required to support salary and wage costs and fringe benefit expenditures charged to the RFSI grants. Each report must account for the total activity for which each employee is compensated, as well as the hours worked on a particular RFSI grant project. A description of activities in support of the grant must be included, and the description must include enough detail to determine whether the activity is project-related. CDFA will share timekeeping templates with the successful applicants. Invoicing. There are two payment methods for allowable costs incurred: advanced payment requests, which would utilize a request form, and a reimbursement payment, which will utilize an invoice form. Invoices must be submitted to CDFA at least quarterly and no more frequently than monthly. It may take up to 45 days from the date the invoice or advance payment request is received for a check to be issued by the California State Controller's Office on behalf of CDFA. Costs covered by advance payment funds must still be authenticated with a valid invoice in the same reporting period that they are purchased in. Record retention. Record retention and accessibility is governed by the 2 CFR 200.334 and 2 CFR 200.337. Recipients must retain financial records, project records, and supporting documentation until May 24, 2030, or until any litigation related to the grant is resolved, whichever is later. All records must be available to CDFA or its designees upon request. Examples of records that must be retained include timesheets and records that reflect the total activity, including descriptions, for which each employee is compensated, actual expenditure invoices of direct costs charged to the grant funds, employee reimbursement claims including lodging, per diem, and transportation receipts, documentation supporting calculations or methodology to determine indirect costs, and all other supporting documentation related to the grant agreement. All recipients will be subject to reporting on their projects. The first type of reporting will be progress reports. Recipients are required to submit a progress report no later than 30 days after each reporting period ends. The progress report is used to identify milestones, results achieved, success stories, potential concerns, and other pertinent information such as program income. Recipients will receive a progress report template from CDFA approximately 1 month prior to each reporting due date. Progress reports will be due annually and at the close of the project, or at the project close for projects that last 1 year or less. The second type of reporting is final reports. Recipients are required to submit a final report no later than 30 days following the expiration date of the grant agreement, or after the project is complete, whichever comes first. Recipients will receive a final report template from CDFA approximately 1 month prior to the end of the project. Note that final reports may be made public. Therefore, the recipient must avoid the use of individuals' names other than the recipient's project's contact information. Finally, remaining funds reporting. 6 months prior to project completion, recipients are required to submit a detailed projection of how expenses will be spent if the remaining budget is greater than 15% of the total award amount, and 6 months prior to the project's completion date. 3 months prior to the project completion date, recipients are required to report any estimated unused funds 3 months prior to the project's completion date. Note, there is no penalty to recipients for having remaining funds at the end of the agreement. CDFA requests this information for budgeting purposes only. A grant recipient will be subject to a single audit requirement if it is state, local, and tribal governments, nonprofit organizations, and institutions of higher education that expend more than $750,000 annually in federal awards. These grant agreements must comply with the single audit requirement contained in the 2 CFR 200, Subpart F, and are required to submit a copy of the single audit report to CDFA. All grant agreements are subject to a minimum of 1 performance site visit, as well as a financial compliance audit, desk review, and/or agreed upon procedure, AUP. The purpose of the compliant reviews is to determine whether measurable outcomes are being met, evaluate accomplishments, and to review financial records and documentation to ensure funds are being used for the intended purpose in compliance with the federal cost principles, the grant agreement terms and conditions, and the GMP. Site visits, audits, desk reviews, and AUPs are generally conducted during the term of the grant agreement, but may be conducted after the grant agreement has ended. Recipients must allow access to records and documentation relevant to the grant agreement, as well as any employees who may reasonably have information related to the grant agreement. Recipients may be required to submit supporting documentation for an invoice, for a desk review, or AUP. Documentation may include, but is not limited to, timesheets and payroll records, travel logs that document mileage, invoice or receipts for costs incurred, lodging, meals, and contractor or consultant contracts and invoices. Speaking of contractual invoices, they should contain sufficient detail to justify expenditures. For scheduling of site visits, a grant analyst will contact the recipient to schedule a performance site visit and/or desk review. For scheduling of an AUP or audit, an authorized representative of CDFA will contact the recipient to request supporting documentation for an AUP and/or to schedule an audit. That concludes the grant management presentation. As always, if you have any additional questions regarding grant management, please submit them to grants@cdfa.ca.gov. Thank you.